Chapter 15, the West and the Changing Balance of Power. It's important to understand that this chapter is a transition chapter from the post-classical to the early modern period. We're going to see a little bit of an overlap when we get into the next several chapters of 16 and 17, a little bit of 18. But mainly the major thing you need to understand is that there was not a clear-cut transition like we had from the classical to post-classical. In the classical, you have the fall of the Roman Empire and the fall of Han China as distinct periods from moving from the transition of classical to post-classical. Here it's a little bit slower. We'll see in Europe as they are taking a couple hundred years to emerge. The Middle East is taking a reshift of power. The Mongols are fading out. A new dynasty is arising in China. So the decline of the old order, the Abbasids destroyed by the Mongols in the 13th century, we've already studied this. The Byzantine Empire falls to the Ottomans in 1453, we've already studied a little bit about that, so we're going to see the emergence of the Ottoman Empire coming about in the next several chapters, especially in the early modern period. Social and cultural change in the Middle East, religious leaders in control by 1300. We're going to see serfdom start to rise in the Middle East, as they are having to deal with an economic decline. A couple reasons for the economic decline. They're inheriting a bad irrigation system with agriculture. We saw before with the Abbasids and their heavy taxes, people were moving away from the agricultural centers to escape the taxes. And on top of that, you were having to deal with the lavish palaces being built, so money wasn't going back into irrigation. The second thing is, as the Ottoman Empire comes to power, they are not going to be as focused internationally as was the Abbasids with trade. They are going to have international trade. Muslim merchants will still be a huge impact in international trade. However, they aren't putting the full extent as had been done earlier. A power vacuum in international leadership. The power vacuum that occurs, you have the Mongols stretching all the way from China all the way over to Eastern Europe. They're controlling a large area, and they're having a lot of influence as far as the world scene goes. When they start to decline, when they start to get defeated and fall back, you have this power vacuum, and what ends up happening is Western Europe starts to form its own identity and take its shape. The Ottoman Empire comes to power in the Middle East, and the Ming Dynasty is going to come to power in China. So no longer do you have more of a world scene with the Mongols. You're having individual pockets of power now. The Chinese thrust and withdrawal. The Ming Dynasty is going to be in power from 1368 to 1644. You're going to see an unusual glimpse of expansionism here. They are going to have sea expeditions into India, the Middle East, and to Africa, specifically the eastern coast. And they're going to be extremely successful. They have some of the best ships in their navy at that time. They also have some of the best commercial ships during this time period as well. However, the fleets are going to be pulled back in 1433 for a couple reasons. One, money. They're having to fight the Mongols to the north and keep them at bay, and they're also having to pay to build their city in Beijing. The other reason is going to be traditionalism. You have a lot of scholar gentry of old Confucianist ideas, and they're wanting to stay more isolated. More isolation, however, they will still stay in contact with Southeast Asia, in the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The rise of the West, period of relative stagnation, 14th to 15th century. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning, it's going to be about a 200-year transition that they're moving into. They're going to have to deal with the feudal age coming to an end. They're going to have to deal with the Black Death in 1348. There's a transition of your nobles and warrior elites. We studied that the 100 Years' War, the major effect of it was the fact that they were going to paid armies, that kings were having the service of their own military and they were paying them. No longer do you have this barter system of service and land in the feudal system. And now it's more or less moving into kind of what is like a Knight's Tale, where you have the jousting tournaments and the knight tournaments. More or less, for appearance sake, the armor that they were wearing would not have been suitable for battle. They wouldn't have had any kind of major mobility in that, and that would have been proven difficult. This will also be the time of reconquering the Iberian Peninsula with the Reconquista. And this is important because you're going to see the emergence of a very strong government here. And you're going to start to see glimpses of their advancement as they start to take form. You also see a little bit of this in Italy as well with trade. Imitations and international problems, trade imbalance. We've studied this before. Europe doesn't have the goods to compete with Asia, with India and China. Therefore, they're having to trade their gold, and they'll also have a low supply of gold. This is one of the reasons why they're going to embark on trade and expedition is the fact that they are looking for more gold. Trade also threatened by the Ottomans. This will be the second reason. The Muslims are coming to a strong power as far as being the middle person between Asia and Europe for your trade. And obviously they're going to mark the price up. Therefore, there was some difficulty. We'll also see the emergence of Italy come about with the Renaissance and their city-states, their banking, their loans. They were making a lot of money because they started to dominate the Mediterranean. And what we'll see is they're going to trade with the Muslims, and so they're going to mark the price up to the rest of Europe. So the goods almost get marked up twice before reaching places in Northern Europe and Western Europe, and so they're looking for other routes. Secular direction in the Italian Renaissance. It's going to take its shape in the 14th century. You're going to see more of a secular viewpoint. You're having a humanistic view, an interest in the classical past, and they're going to take more of a human individual position than dealing with divinity. We saw a lot of paintings early on of the church and of the Bible. Now you're going to, in this Renaissance, you're going to be seeing a lot of paintings that are using perspectives, shadows, interest in individuals, interest in ordinary life and in nature, so moving away from the divinity a little bit here. The Iberian spirit of religious mission, we just mentioned the Reconquista, the reconquering of the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslims and the Jews. All right, early explorers. Italy's going to have some early explorers in the Vivaldi brothers. They are not going to be so successful. The book kind of is a little bit of humor here. They are not to be seen anymore, so very short little segment there. It does put a little bit of hesitation, mainly because they're not having the ships. As technology spreads from the Mongols, so will their knowledge of the compass and shipbuilding improve, and so Europe will begin more of their expeditions in the 14th century with Prince Henry the Navigator, and they're going to be exploring the islands off the coast of Europe and Africa. Outside the world network, the Americas and Polynesians not part of international trade. It's going to be several centuries. It's not going to be till the end of the early modern, getting in more to the modern period where you're going to see some major influence in the Polynesian area. The Aztecs, though, a lot of historians believe even before Spain gets over there and obviously has gunpowder and disease that attack the Incas, that the Aztec and Incas were already on their way downward, just due to some internal problems and internal weaknesses, especially with the Inca spreading their range a little bit too far, and a lot of local leaders were threatening the government at that time. The Polynesian area will expand between 700 and 1400. You're going to have your large dugout canoes. They were extremely navigable with the trade winds, and so they're going to spread up into the Polynesian Islands area, even as far north as Hawaii, over to the Easter Islands, down to New Zealand with the Morris. Adding up the changes, 1400, a time of change globally. Technological change, as I mentioned earlier, the Mongols spreading ideas. The main thing to get from that, from chapter 14 in this one, is that the Mongols provided safe trade, provided new ideas and technology, and obviously spread the Black Plague as well. The one thing to note, Africa relatively unaffected. Even though we saw the beginning stages of slavery, it was just comparable to what the Muslims were dealing with and what had already been in that area. We're going to see some new alliances with Muslims, and we're also going to see some new alliances with the Mediterranean states. But right now, with this transition stage, they're still relatively unaffected. It's going to be in this next unit that we're going to study, we're going to see some major influences in this region. And that will conclude chapter 15.